Good morning. How are you? So today the question that has come in is from Roberta Bettinson. She says, hello Deepak, I have met you numerous times in the last 20 years. Always a pleasure. I have just turned 60 a few months ago and I find I get anxious when I hear of people around me passing over. I have so much I still need to accomplish in my life. I find that I get fearful of passing over. I would love to still be in physical form for the next 30 or 40 years. How do I stop focusing on this in my life? Blessings, Roberta. P.S. When will you return to Vancouver? So, Roberta, I have no idea right now, but I'm sure I'll be returning to Vancouver soon. Let's answer your question. So last night I was in a very interesting debate, dialogue, conversation with the head of the Skeptical magazine, the founder of Skeptics magazine, and basically the brand name for skepticism, and his name is Michael Shermer, and in a way I was one of the few outsiders in the den of these what I believe are pseudo-skeptics, and I'll tell you why. I was in the den of the pseudo-skeptics. They call themselves card-carrying skeptics. I would say, yes, card-carrying pseudo-skeptics with an evangelical fervor. And, they did a lot of God-bashing, a lot of bashing of the afterlife, a lot of kind of disdain for religion, although I pointed out that religion is not the same thing as religious experience. Nevertheless, a lot of time was spent in debunking so-called life after death. Now, in the few minutes that I had to make my point, this is what I pointed out. I asked Michael Shermer where yesterday was, and he said somewhere in my memory, but the point was yesterday doesn't exist anymore, as the very fact that 5 minutes ago doesn't exist anymore, a second ago doesn't exist anymore. By the time you hear the end of my sentence, the beginning of my sentence doesn't exist anymore. So the point I was making was, of course, that experience is ungraspable. The past is ungraspable. The future is ungraspable. And that which we call the present moment is ungraspable because it arises and subsides in every now. We can't even call it a moment of now. Can't even call it a moment of now, because now is not a moment in time, just like here is not a location in space. Now here is the ever-present, timeless awareness in which every experience arises in every now and also subsides in every now. So basically the point is that birth and death happen in every now. Birth and death happen in every now. The body is just an experience. The body is an experience. You're not your body. The body is not the container of awareness. The body is an experience of awareness. I'll repeat that in a slightly better way. The body is not the container of awareness. The body is an experience in awareness. It's an experience in awareness. It's not a noun, it's a verb. And it's actually being born and dying in every now. There's no permanence at all to any experience, including the experience of that which we call our body. You are not the body you were when you were a child. You were not the body when you were a baby. You're not the body when you were an adolescent. And you're not the body now, because that which you call a body is a human construct for an intermittent stream of sensations and perceptions arising and subsiding in awareness now. So, similarly, you're not the mind, because the mind is the thought that arises and subsides in every now. Emotions are feelings that arise and subside in every now, as are all sensations and perceptions and images. So there is no such thing as the mind either. Mind and body are human constructs around modes of awareness, knowing itself as the subject and object of experience in every now. You're not your personality either, because personality arises and subsides also. So here's the first thing to grasp. Death is not the opposite of life. Death is the opposite of birth. Birth and death are the continuum of life in every now. Birth and death are the continuum of life in every now. Therefore, the fear of death comes from grasping that which cannot be grasped. All experience, whether it's that of the mind or the body or that which we call the universe, and the deeper reality, there's no universe either. The universe is an interpretation of sense perceptions that arise in every now and subside in every now. So, what that which we call mind, body, universe are human constructs, useful for doing science and creating technology, but totally useless for giving us the experience of who am I, what am I? And that's the crucial answer that needs to come from diving deep into the nature of the self, which is not the mind, which is not the body, and which is not the universe. That's why you are not in the universe is in you. You are not in the mind is in you. You are not in the body is in you. The mind, body, and universe are human constructs and experiences of sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, and sense perceptions arising and subsiding in a timeless now. I didn't say eternal. Eternal means stretching endlessly in time. Timeless simply means not in time whatsoever. So how do you lose the fear of death? Well, you can only lose the fear of death if you go beyond all constructs. But before I come to that, because even birth and death are constructs, based on the false premise that you're the body or you're the mind or you are somehow a material object. So let me come back to that in 15 seconds, okay? So before I come back to how to overcome the fear of death, which I'm kind of hinting at right now, I've hinted at, let me also point out something that we didn't have time to discuss in detail last night at this dialogue debate with my pseudo-skeptic card-carrying friends, card-carrying pseudo-skeptics, who had an evangelical fervor, by the way. It was almost funny. The fervor and the emotion that goes with being a card-carrying pseudo-skeptic. In any case, so one of the things that came up was what is reality, and I was pointing out that reality is everyday reality is a species-specific perceptual experience, and then the interpretation of that what we call matter is the interpretation of sense perceptions. Matter is the interpretation, that it really doesn't exist. Nobody has proved the existence of matter. I asked Baba Brinkman, who is an extraordinary rapper, and I enjoyed him very much. His wife is a neuroscientist, Heather Berlin, and very good friends now. But I still think steeped in the superstition of materialism. What can I say? Superstition of materialism means that they believe in the existence of matter and an observer-independent world which, if it actually exists, will never be accessible to us. So as the conversation expanded, and I pointed out that what we call the material world is a human construct, and that matter doesn't really exist. It's the interpretation of sense perceptions, and what we experience is a human universe, not a dolphin universe or a shark universe or a crocodile universe. And Michael Shermer pointed out, and Heather agreed, of course, that a dolphin and a shark may not see the same thing, but there is a predator-prey relationship, and so they're sensing each other. And I totally agree with that. But the word shark and the word dolphin is a human construct for a particular mode of experience. Sharks and dolphins are human names to a species of consciousness, and when sharks, dolphins, other predators, preys interact with each other, this is consciousness interacting with each other, and there are modes of experience and knowing interacting with each other. The rest are labels. And in fact, evolution prevents us from knowing the truth. So imagine you could experience not just the narrow band of your own experience, you know, what the Germans call the Umwelt, which is the narrow band of experience that humans have. And then, of course, every species has its own narrow band. What if you could experience the whole range of experience that is available? Well, that would disturb the whole evolutionary process, right? Because evolution is, even though classical evolution, Darwinian evolution, Darwin, by the way, did not know anything about genes or epigenetics, or even addressed the hard problem of consciousness. But if you go away from Darwinian evolution and do understand evolution as the evolution and differentiation of species of consciousness from pure consciousness, then you can see that remaining within your Umwelt actually helps evolution and allows evolution to proceed with a delicate, within a delicate ecosystem, and knowing the entire truth of experience, knowing the entire truth of experience, all species would actually disturb the ecosystem. Imagine you could look at a tree through the eyes of an insect, or a bird, or an eagle, or a snake, and then that would totally destroy the play of consciousness that we call life, and the evolution of consciousness that differentiates into species of consciousness, and hopefully it hasn't ended. We will evolve from human to meta-human unless we blow it and cause our own extinction. So, be that as it may, let's come to what is reality. Reality cannot be anything perceivable or conceivable because, or imaginable. Reality cannot be anything that is perceivable, conceivable, or imaginable, because whatever you experience as perception, conception, imagination doesn't have any fixed reality. It's dependent on who's looking, and the questions they're asking when they're looking. Heisenberg said, nature reveals itself to us not as she is, but exposed to our method of questioning. So science is very valid for certain things and totally invalid for answering questions like, who wants to know? Who is doing science? Science can't explain any experience, including the experience of doing science. So then these questions come up, these constructs. When you create a construct, I'm a person, and there is no such thing. A person is a process in awareness and has no fundamental reality, just arising, subsiding, arising, subsiding. So then you create constructs of birth and death, and you start to debunk extra, what are called supernatural experiences, when in fact we can't explain what is natural. So before debunking out-of-body experiences, science really needs to explain in-body experience, because there's no one inside your body. Because your body, in fact, is an experience in you. So how to overcome the fear of death? To ground yourself in being, which is not subject to birth and death. Being or awareness or consciousness is the only constant in every experience. It's the timeless factor in every time-bound experience. And then we are grounded in there, then you realize that the true self is never born, and therefore is not subject to death. So you cannot overcome your fear of death by trying to analyze. You cannot overcome your fear of death by identifying with that which actually doesn't exist. Go back to very fundamental principles of what I call monistic consciousness-only paradigm. The monistic consciousness-only paradigm, not the matter-only paradigm, because matter is a human construct based on interpretation of sense perceptions. The sense perceptions are activities of consciousness in every now, arising and subsiding. So, you can't get rid of your fear of death through a system of thought. You have to ground yourself in being that was never born. I'll conclude with 4 very fundamental principles. All stories are human constructs, all stories, whether it's a theological story, a religious story, a philosophical story, a scientific story, a mythical story. Everyone has a story. Everyone believes in their story. And all stories are equally untrue. They're useful to create maps of reality, but they're not reality. Reality cannot be a system of thought. Reality has to be that which gives rise to thought. What gives rise to thought? Awareness. What gives rise to feeling, perception, sensation? Awareness. These are activities of awareness that occur in awareness, that are known in awareness, and that are made out of awareness. And that awareness is the only constant, the only timeless factor in every time-bound experience. What you experience as the physical world is a projection of your story, which is a conditioned mind. The mind is conditioned. Doesn't matter if it's scientifically conditioned, it's still conditioned. Science is a methodology with certain principles, theories conceived in consciousness, experiments designed in consciousness, observations made in consciousness, and all the while ignoring consciousness. We cannot know reality through the scientific method or through religion. We can know it through religious experience, which is transcendence, the emergence of Platonic qualities in consciousness, such as the desire to know truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, understand evolution, the experience of love, compassion, joy, equanimity. And number 3, the loss of the fear of death, because the transcendent is not in time. So, going back to basic principles. Number 1, perceptual experience is a result, as a projection of the conditioned mind. Number 2, the real you was never born and therefore is not subject to birth and death. And number 3, the ego self is an illusion. And number 4, if you can perceive it, conceptualize it, imagine it, see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, think about it, imagine it, then it's not the real reality. It's a transient, evanescent perceptual experience. What is real is the formless, dimensionless, timeless, ontological, primitive awareness which experiences itself as both the subject and object of experience in every now. So Jean Maroc says, do you think you made any headway with the skeptics? I don't think so. I call them pseudo-skeptics. Real skeptics question their perceptual experiences as truth. Real skeptics question the existence of matter. Real skeptics are wanting to know the nature of nothing that becomes everything. At the deepest level, nothing is everything, and it is you. Last night, by the way, I also met a very interesting and very well-known young man by the name of Mike Posner. And I've been listening to his album since last night. And he's an amazing singer. His YouTube videos, there have been billions of downloads on iTunes. And he is amazing. And he was grounded in reality. He made a beautiful statement that all language differentiates that which is a unified experience in being. Michael Posner. And I enjoyed him very much, and I hope to connect with him as well. Okay, I hope I've answered your question. You do not need to fear death. Death is the opposite of birth, and birth and death are the continuum of existence and life and awareness, which is the true self, the self of the individual, which is also the self of the universe. Okay, and there was another young lady there who was extraordinary at the event. She spoke about her spiritual transformation when she journeyed through natural environments, walking and connecting with nature, and going beyond the subject-object split and experiencing herself as nature itself. The subject-object split is artificial. Towards the end, by the way, they had a video about climate change and how people are denying it. And I'd like to point out that climate change is real. Climate change is real. But don't forget that climate change is the result of scientific progress, the industrial age, a result of science, which brought us all the conveniences of modern living. But when our spiritual and emotional development does not keep pace with the progress of scientific technology, then we create diabolical technologies like nuclear weapons, atomic bombs. We bring poison to our food chain, and by not knowing our own self as being an activity of nature, we also destroy it. So climate change is the result of scientific progress. It can be reversed with scientific progress. But do not forget that science, without knowing who or what is doing the science, who or what wants to know, what is the knowing element in every experience, in the experience of that which you call mind, body, and that which you call the universe. That kind of science based on pure subject-object split, assuming an observer-independent world which can never be verified or falsified or known. That kind of science is incomplete. And that kind of science will create problems, and then we'll have to use science to solve the problems as well. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, so that's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow.